Sakasak Yoriveshate Krita Praja Visarge Vipachami Bhojanam Aviklavaste Parikarmanistito Mame Samuna Dhamado Jamaninaha.
Avatsaka Sakyuriveshate Krita Raja Visarge Vibhajami Bhojanam Vikavaste Parikarmani Stito Mame Munadamado Jamanaha.
Yavatsaka Sakyo Veshate Krita Raja Visarge Jami Bhojana Mavikla Manishito Mame Samuna Dhamato Jamanina Yavatsaka Sakyuriveshate Krita
Yavatsaka Yoriveshate Krita
Praja Visarge Vibhajami Bhojanam
Praja Visarge Vipachami Bhojanam
Aviklavaste Parikarmani Stito
Aviklavaste Parikarmanistito
Mame Samudnadhamaro Maninaha
Mame Samuna Dhammato Jamaninaha.
Yavatsaka Sakyuriveshate Krita Praja Visarge Vibhajami Bhojanam Aviklavaste Parikarmani Stito Mame Samuna Dhamado Jamanina
Yavatsaka Sakyuriveshate Krita Raja Visarge Vibhajami Bhojanam Aviklavaste Parikarmani Stito Mame Samuna Dhamado Jamanina
Yavatsaka Sakyuriveshate Krita
Yavatsaka Yoriveshate Krita
Praja Visarge Vibhajami Bhojanam
Praja Visarge Vipachami Bhojanam
Aviklavaste Parikarmani Stito
Aviklavaste Parikarmanistito
Mame Samadhamado Jamanina.
Mame Samuna Dhammato Jamaninaha. Okay. Word for word translation. Yavat, as it is. Saka, friend. Sakyu, unto the friend. Eva, like that. Isha, O Lord. Hey, you. Krita, have accepted. Praja, the living entities. Visarge, in the matter of creation. Vibhajami, as I shall do it differently. Bo, O my Lord, Janam, those who are born, Aviklava, without being perturbed, Te Yor, Parikarmani, in the matter of service, Stita, thus situated, Ma, may it never be, May, unto me, Samunadha, resulting arise, Mada, madness, Aja, O unborn one, Maninaha, thus being thought of. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. O my Lord, the unborn, you have shaken hands with me just as a friend does with a friend, as if in equal position. I shall be engaged in the creation of different types of living entities, and I shall be occupied in your service. I shall have no perturbation, but I pray that all this may not give rise to pride, as if I were the supreme. Purport. Lord Brahma is definitely situated in the humor of friendship with the Lord. Every living being is eternally related with the personality of Godhead in one of 5 different transcendental humors, namely Shanta, Dasya, Sakya, Vatsalya, and Madhurya. We have already discussed these 5 kinds of humors in relationship with the personality of Godhead. It is clearly exhibited herein that Lord Brahma is related to the personality of Godhead in the transcendental humor of friendship. A pure devotee may be related with the Lord in any one of the transcendental humors. Even in the humor of parenthood, the devotee of the Lord is always a transcendental servitor. No one is equal to or greater than the Lord. That is the version of the Bhagavad Gita. Brahmaji, although eternally related with the Lord, is in the transcendental humor of friendship, and although entrusted with the most exalted post of creating different grades of living entities, is still conscious of his position, that he is neither the Supreme Lord nor supremely powerful. It is possible that some extremely powerful personality within or without the universe may sometimes show more power than the Lord himself. Still, the pure devotee knows that this power is a vibhuti delegated by the Lord. And such a delegated, powerful living entity is never independent. Sri Hanumanji crossed the Indian Ocean by jumping over the sea, and Lord Sri Ramachandra engaged himself in marching over the bridge. But this does not mean that Hanumanji was more powerful than the Lord. Sometimes the Lord gives extraordinary powers to his devotee, but the devotee knows always that the power belongs to the personality of Godhead, and that the devotee is only an instrument. The pure devotee is never puffed up like the non-devotee class of men who falsely think that they are God. It is astonishing to see how a person who is being kicked by the laws of the Lord's illusory energy at every step can falsely think of becoming one with the Lord. Such thinking is the last snare of the illusory energy offered to the conditioned soul. The first illusion is that he wants to become Lord of the material world by accumulating wealth and power. But when he is frustrated in that attempt, he wants to be one with the Lord. So both becoming the most powerful man in the material world and desiring to become one with the Lord are different illusory snares. And because the pure devotees of the Lord are surrendered souls, they are above the illusory snares of Maya. Because Lord Brahma is a pure devotee, even though the first dominating deity in the material world and therefore able to do many wonderful things, he would never, like the non-devotee with a poor fund of knowledge, have the audacity to think of becoming one with the Lord. People with a poor fund of knowledge should take lessons from Brahma when they are puffed up with the false notion of becoming God. Factually, Lord Brahma does not create the living entities. In the beginning of the creation, he is empowered to give different bodily shapes to living entities according to their work during the last millennium. Brahmaji's duty is just to wake the living entities from their slumber and to engage them in their proper duty. The different grades of living entities are not created by Brahmaji by his capricious whims, but he is entrusted with the task of giving the living entities different grades of bodies so that they can work accordingly. And still he is conscious that he is only instrumental, so that he may not think of himself as the supreme powerful Lord. Devotees of the Lord are engaged in the specific duty offered by the Lord, and such duties are successfully carried out without hindrance because they are ordained by the Lord. The credit of success goes not to the doer, but to the Lord. But persons with a poor fund of knowledge take the credit of success into their own accounts and give nothing to the credit of the Lord. That is the symptom of the non-devotee class of men. Translation again. O my Lord, the unborn, you have shaken hands with me just as a friend does with a friend, as if in equal position. I shall be engaged in the creation of different types of living entities, and I shall be occupied in your service. I shall have no perturbation, but I pray that all this may not give rise to pride, as if I were the supreme. Maharaj, we would love to hear your comments on this translation and purport.
When we're praised for something, even if we don't have the qualification that we're said to have, we like to think that we're qualified, and we do have that qualification. Everyone likes to be praised. And this idea of becoming one with God is really quite audacious. The audacity of thinking that one can become equal with God, and considering our present situation where we're under the dictates, difficulties of material nature, we get a toothache and we're crying. We run to the dentist, please help me. But if we're God, if we're equal to the Supreme, we shouldn't have to take help from any doctors. But this is going on, and it's made a mockery of the whole idea. What is God? So people become so disgusted, they give up the whole idea of God. God can't be a person anymore. Or at least they would keep the idea that God is the supreme being. They don't know what kind of being, I don't know what he looks like, and they're not very much interested to know, which is shocking. Why would they not be interested to know what God looks like? We're interested to know so many living entities look like. If someone's very famous, we want to see what they look like. If they're very wealthy, we want to see what they look like. We write books about people, ordinary people, talk about what they like for eating, what they like to wear. But when it comes to God, there's no information. But there is information. The information is found primarily in the Vedic literature. So naturally the Vedic literature will be the leading, the dominant force. But there has been a strong attempt to disallow the Vedic knowledge to stand on its own by the learned, so-called learned circles. They have criticized Vedic literature for being simply mythology. No, it can't be accepted as factual because everyone knows there's no such thing as life on other planets, and there's no such thing as people with foreheads and things like that. But they don't take into consideration that there's millions of planets they haven't visited, and their telescopes are not that powerful. They can see what's going on in each of these planets. So it's possible that there could be life, and it could actually be explained in the Vedas. So this should be explored. Intelligent person will want to explore this information. How can he ignore it? When it's speaking of a type of life that is so much more advanced than ours. Brilliant persons able to do extraordinary things. It's interesting. We should learn about this. How do they have these powers? How do they get the power to appear and disappear and do amazing things? How can they fly in the sky? Airplanes weren't discovered then. So they need to hear this, but the big problem is lack of humility, and that's what Brahma is dealing with here. He's afraid that he's going to become puffed up, even though he knows the Lord. He's experienced his incredible power. Still, he's afraid of becoming puffed up, and it can happen. One can become puffed up with his little power, thinking that he's equal with God. So we have to be aware of pride and be very careful not to think that we're the doer. It starts with thinking we're the doer. Look what I did. Look how much money I made. Look at the artwork I did. Look at everything. Listen to my voice. All we take credit for everything as if we were the doers. There's a saying, shouldn't be proud of borrowed plumes. You're wearing some feathers, someone else's. Don't be proud of it. They don't belong to you. Or like a chauffeur, he's driving a very advanced, elegant automobile. And when he's driving around town, perhaps the master is not in the car at the time. So he's driving and people are amazed at the car and he's taking credit. They're amazed at me and my wonderful achievement in acquiring this car and driving it. He begins to think he's the owner. So much so that when the master's away, he may go in the master's bedroom and sleep there instead. Or he might even try to take other advantage of the master. So this is our big danger, is pride of thinking that we're as great as the Lord, or if you just take a humble position like Brahma, he's so advanced, so intelligent, still bows down to the Lord and offers to serve him as a menial servant.
I thank you, Maharaj. I'm reminded of this past time when Krishna summoned Brahma to Dwarka, and Krishna was showing Lord Brahma that he wasn't so special. Lord Brahma got there and he said, he's knocking on the door saying, it's Brahma. And they said, hold on. And then they came back and said, which Brahma? And he was like, what? Which Brahma? I'm Brahma. And, he goes into this assembly and Krishna grants him the power to see everything that's going on. But, all these other individual Brahmas come by their own selves. And when the Brahma of our universe with four heads sees all these Brahmas bowing down to the Lord, it is the way it was described is really phenomenal, of the way that all these crowns are hitting the ground. Because you got to think our Brahma has four heads, but then there's some with 1,000 heads, 100,000 heads, and they're all bowing down to Lord Krishna. So all you hear is ting, 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 from all the crowns hitting the ground. So this is a very pertinent point to not give into this pride, to not succumb ourselves to pride. Earlier in Srimad Bhagavatam, in the beginning of the second canto, Shukadev Goswami, he's talking to Maharaj Parikshit, and he says, the crown of a king is just merely useless labor, just a dead weight on his head if he's not bowing down to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So whatever qualities or positions we may have in this life, if we're not using it in the service of Krishna, it's merely just a burden, because it's furthering our entanglement, furthering our suffering in the material world. But if we use what Krishna provides and use in his service, then immediately all these opulences become a source of pleasure and joy, because we realize where it comes from. It comes from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Prabhupada in the purport, he was talking about how this vibhuti is the power. It's delegated by the Lord. And we're reading right now in the 10th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita. It's all about the Lord's vibhutis, his different opulences, which are unlimited, which he only just names a few. So the Supreme Personality of Godhead is unlimited, and we are very, very small. And I was hearing from Prabhupada yesterday, and he was talking about how Krishna is the biggest, God is the biggest of all, and we are just small. But Krishna is also small. He's smaller than the smallest. So what's our position? We're nothing. We're not nothing, but we are completely insignificant in relation to the Lord. Just a product of his energy, a product of his creation. Shri Shri Gaura Nitai Ki Jai. And like Maharaj is pointing out, that we get some little power, we get some charisma, we get some quality, some trait, and all of a sudden we think that we're great, that we're the doer, we're the controller. By my potency, I'm able to control my mind. By my potency, I'm able to influence people. I'm able to speak. By my potency, I'm able to remember so many shlokas. Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita says he's the source of knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. He says he's the power of man. He's the strength of the strong. So whatever's there, we have to recognize where this is coming from. So this is humility. Humility doesn't mean to beat ourselves up into the ground and think that we're just some bum that has no goodness in us. Humility means to see our position in relation to the Lord, that the Lord is great and everything that I have is coming from him. So the natural conclusion would be, let me take what he gives and use in his service. It's not that we try to beat ourselves up and break ourselves down. This naturally comes when we realize the Lord's greatness. When we realize how great the Lord is, then we realize how insignificant we are. So we see from our acharyas, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Narottama Das Thakur, Krishnadas Goswami, a lot of their writings and prayers, their bhajans, and have this mood of that. I am nothing. I'm the most fallen. I'm insignificant. I wasted my time. I wasted my life. I'm lower than a worm and stool. This is good. We should look up to them and praise their humility, but we cannot artificially try to adhere to this level of being. It's easy to try to think like this with overexertion, and we beat ourselves into depression because we're thinking ourselves just super low and we have nothing, and I have no love for Krishna. No, I have pride. I think I'm great. I think I'm the doer. The differences between me and the acharyas is that they do not think they're the doer. They're realizing Krishna's greatness, so they're turning to Krishna. And then through that, Narottama Das Thakur, from he did not waste his life. He did not waste a moment. He was always engaged in Krishna service. But in his bhajan, he's saying, "Oh, I've wasted my life. I've completely wasted it because I haven't served the divine couple, Shri Radha and Krishna." The acharyas, they're perfect. They're there to show us how to act. But we need to act from our position and try to follow in their footsteps. But we cannot fill their shoes. If we try to fill their shoes, it's going to be a dangerous situation. Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, he even talks about following your own path instead of trying to imitate others. By us following our own path, then we'll deal with our stumbling blocks and hurdles and realizations and level of intelligence from where we're at. And as we strive to follow in the footsteps of those great beings who've showed us how to walk, to cross over from this material world, cross into the spiritual world by the grace of Krishna, then purification will come. But if we try to artificially act from a position where we're at, it can be much, much difficult to deal with things as they arise. We may think we're more advanced than we are, and then all of a sudden Krishna shows us where we're at, and we get smacked down. I thought I was good at chanting japa. I thought I could really control my mind. And then all of a sudden, I have no control over my mind. So, here Brahma, he's praying that he doesn't fall victim to this pride. In a few verses, the Lord will begin to respond to Lord Brahma, his inquiry. He asked a few questions here. He's asking a few questions so he could better understand the nature of the Lord, so he could better execute his devotional service. And Lord Krishna, he speaks this Chatur Shloki, which is the essence of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the original 4 verses of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And afterwards, the Lord tells Brahma, I'll just read it real quick. He says, "O Brahma, just follow this conclusion by fixed concentration of mind, and no pride will disturb you, neither in partial nor in the final devastation." So follow this conclusion by fixed concentration of mind. So Brahma has these 4 verses spoken by the Lord. We have 18,000 verses. We have purports by Srila Prabhupada, purports by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. We have so many lectures to hear. So Krishna is saying, just absorb your mind in the Bhagavatam and constantly hear the glories of the Lord, realizing that the Lord is the source of everything, and whatever's not directly connected to him is Maya. And that you should always search for this in everything, both material and spiritual. We should always look for this facet of life. In this way, we can stay humble and fixed on the spiritual path, but this requires a steady mind. In the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, Krishna, he's speaking to Uddhava, and he's talking about controlling the mind. And he says it's like to bring the mind under control. It's like trying to control a horse, like a wild horse, like not so tamed horse. So the horse sometimes, I don't know if anybody's been around like horses, like in like a big city, there'll be like a police riding a horse. And these horses are like super trained because they're surrounded by like thousands of people doing all sorts of things, but the horse are super calm. But a horse that's not so trained, as soon as there's like a horn that honks or, a loud noise, then, it jumps up and it wants to get giddy and run around. So this is the same as our mind. In a favorable situation, we may think our mind is under control, but as soon as, the wind blows and carries a certain aroma, or, this devotee walks like 2 feet too close to me or something, then immediately disturbed. And then from that disturbance, it can very easily spin out of control and become more and more disturbed. So this horse with Krishna, he tells Uddhava that when you're trying to control this horse, first you let the horse go a little bit where it goes, and then you bring it back under control. So if you just try to sit him here and force him to do exactly what you want to do, he's going to rebel and freak out. But if you let him, kick and go this way, like, okay, go, here's a little room, do what you got to do, and now come back. This is what we're doing. So what's the point of this? The point is that, yeah, our mind will wander away. We are conditioned souls. We are not the doer. How long have we been practicing Krishna consciousness? Do we expect that we're just going to have a perfectly controlled mind? No, there's so much junk in our heart. So we take up the practice of sadhana bhakti. Practice, practice, practice. And we're chanting every day. Our practice should be this, to let go of the mind. Okay, the mind thought about this. Big deal. Let it go and bring it back to what we're doing. And if we practice this over and over, as we continue to gain spiritual strength and spiritual realization, it becomes laughable that the mind wants to think about such nonsensical things all the time. But when we're engrossed in the push and pulls of the mind, I may be endeavoring like anything to control my mind, and then I become frustrated because I can't control it. Krishna, he says in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna tells Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita to control his mind, and Arjuna says, I can't do that. It's be easier to control the wind. So if Arjuna is rejecting that, then why should we get disturbed that I can't control my mind? Later in that same chapter, in the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam, it's the 20th chapter, if anybody wants to check it out. Krishna, he talks about his devotees performing devotional service, and he says, I don't have it exactly in detail because there was more to it, but there was a really nice point that he said that even if my devotee slips up and, falls victim to a lapse of awareness or gives into sense gratification, big deal that they know that there's no happiness in this sense gratification, even though they may try to do it. I may have so much anxiety and disturbance in my mind, or even I just walk outside and I have no plans for it, but I see something that brings back old memories. Somebody smoking a cigarette, or somebody watching a movie about nonsense, whatever it may be, and you give into that. You may give into it, but still, there's no happiness there. You're trying to mitigate your distress or problems, but still, there's no happiness. So Krishna says, they go on performing yoga, and the main point is you bring your mind back where it needs to be. So we keep bringing our mind back where it needs to be, and as we continue to take up this path of bhakti yoga and performing devotional service, purification will be there. The Lord is supremely merciful. Srila Prabhupada is supremely merciful. Guru is supremely merciful. The Vaishnavas are supremely merciful. Everybody just wants the best from us. And everybody slips up. It's so easy to think that, I'm standing in Mangal Arti, I'm totally spaced out. I'm like thinking about so much like junk, and I'm seeing all the devotees. I'm like, wow, everybody's so perfect. They're so Krishna conscious, and I'm so miserable. I'm so fallen. But if we could truly see what's going on in everybody's mind, everybody's dealing with anxiety and desires and lust and doubts to different degrees. So we just have to continue on and push towards Krishna consciousness, towards surrender. We need to fill our mind with Krishna consciousness philosophy from the Bhagavatam, from the Bhagavad Gita, and just keep striving and lift up those around us. This is the goal of life, actually. We may think there's more to life, but this is what Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita. Those devotees, they derive ever increasing bliss and pleasure by discussing my glories. So it's easy to get an anxiety. What should I do with my life? What should I do? Is this the best thing? Am I in the best place? But if we simply just associate with devotees and glorify Krishna and utilize our time properly in Krishna service and getting absorbed one way or another, getting absorbed in Pujari Seva, getting absorbed in what we're reading in the scriptures, getting absorbed in our chanting, getting absorbed in our Seva of washing the dishes, whatever it may be. Then all these doubts and anxieties about life, they seem minuscule. So thank you everybody for hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Yes, Mataji? Can we get a microphone? Well, you raised your hand first, but whoever wants to go, that's okay with me.
Hare Krishna. I was just thinking on how gratitude is a nice combatant to this pride that we're talking about. Because if you're just trying to avoid pride without gratitude, you can also fall into like a lower depressive state. And a lot of the prayers of our acharyas, yes, they're taking a very humble mood, but you see in the whole picture of the prayer, they're starting somewhere with a very humble mood, and usually they're thanking the Lord for bringing them out of it, or asking the Lord, please, like humbly, take me out of it, because they're seeing that they're not the doer, so gratitude, if you're grateful for something, some service or some performance of action or duty, and you're grateful for the duty and you're grateful for the ability, you're giving credit where it's due, so pride ceases to develop in that way.
It's a good point. Not even pride, but like anxiety. A lot of us have anxiety. It's if you're truly feeling grateful, there's no room for anxiety. But when we're not in that state, then it's anxiety because we worry, we're trying to control. So it's a nice point. Yeah.
Hare Krishna. So when Krishna says that we're not the doer, does this mean that we can't act or do anything without the Lord's mercy or sanction, and that ultimately we only really have our desire, and it's our desire and our love and devotion that actually is actually what we're performing? Does this make sense?
Yeah, I mean, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says there's 5 factors of action. So the jiva is Ishvara, meaning we are a controller. So this matter, Ishvara can control and manipulate matter to a certain extent, but we're limited. Supreme Lord is Parameshwar, the supreme controller. So in these 5 factors of action that Krishna describes. Ultimately, the 5th one is the super soul, the supreme director. So then we hear in the scriptures that not even a blade of grass blows without the sanction of the Lord. Does that mean the Lord is like completely directing every single grass and, it's going exactly how he wants? Maybe. Does it mean that, everything is perfectly designed and the Lord is within every atom and in supreme control of everything? Definitely. So whatever we're doing, we're limited in our capabilities, and the Lord has unlimited capabilities. There's always there. So naturally, you would turn to the Lord and see that he's the doer, he's the bestower of benedictions. But as far as what we can do, yeah, we're limited to our desire. Like, we have free will, and if you examine free will more closely, we can essentially choose to be free in the material world, and then you actually get bonded up by the modes of material nature, the gunas, and then get stuck in a prison of karma. Or we can desire to turn to the Lord, and when we turn to the Lord, you surrender. It seems like you're surrender, you're giving up your freedom, but you actually are given more room for freedom. It's like a dog who's trained. A dog who's trained doesn't need a leash. He follows the instructions of his master. So like we see Narada Muni, he's traveling all over the creation of the world, of all different universes, the spiritual world, material world. But those dogs who are bad and they run after every cat they see, or every dog they see, they need to be on a leash, very short, tight leash. So we're in that position. So we're on this leash. So we think we're free, but we're actually controlled by the Lord. So we can turn to the Lord, but still the Lord is beyond our control. This is exemplified by this pastime with Mother Yashoda and Damodar, where Krishna is being chased by Mother Yashoda, and Krishna is caught and she's trying to tie him up. He only allows himself to be tied up because of the love and devotion that she's exhibiting. So we can try to grasp the Lord's mercy, but always come up short. So it's said that Krishna is attracted by devotional service. So by rendering devotional service, naturally it attracts Krishna, but still the devotee knows that Krishna's mercy is causeless. He can do whatever he wants to do. So then what's this prayer by Lord Chaitanya? You may make me brokenhearted by not embracing me, by not appearing before me, but still I'm your servant. I just want to serve you birth after birth after birth. So he's not even saying, please take me out of this material world. He's just saying, I just want to serve you. And if we follow in Lord Chaitanya's footsteps, that's the way to receive the Lord's mercy, by adopting that mood that, Tate nukampam samikshamano, punjana evatma kritam vipakam hridag vapur bir vedadan namaste jiveta yamukti sades of Dayabak. I messed up the last line. Anyways, one who's suffering all the reactions of their past sins, of their karma, and goes on glorifying the Lord with heart, mind, body, and words, his rightful claim is liberation. So that's all we can do, actually, is realize that we're in a tough situation. It's just because of our own doing, and turn to the Lord and wait for his mercy. It's all that we can really do. It's out of our hands, but we can cling to the lotus feet of our guru and receive protection, shelter. In this way, the Lord's mercy is guaranteed, as we sing every morning. Sya prasadat bhagavat prasado. So that's if there's a secret to spiritual life, that's the secret. We look up at all of our acharyas. They followed the same process. That's what they're teaching. That's what they're showing. That's what they're exemplifying. But still, we may think to some degree, like deep in our heart, that we're the doer. So that I do this activity, therefore I deserve to be loved by Krishna. Krishna is beyond us. So as we continue devotional service, Krishna, he'll reveal more and more that we're not the doer. But this, like I was mentioning earlier. Like this should naturally come of its own accord as we view and study the scriptures in the lives of the acharyas, especially, and follow them. But always pursuing from where we're at. It's like we're aware of where we're at, but we keep our eyes on the goal, not that we just get stuck here or we think we're there. No, we have to be honest and real. Another way of looking at humility is honesty. Seeing, I'm limited. Like Prabhupada makes the point that you can't even see without the lights. Like if the sun doesn't come out today, we can't see, we can't live, we can't do anything. Like, so that's just one example of nearly infinite examples of how we are completely dependent on things outside of ourselves. The Lord is independent. So I hope that's helpful. Some thoughts. Shrimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Shri Shri Gauranatai ki jai. Vansha Kapatarubhyas Chakripas and Nibhi Pachapatitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha.